Hey, toy collector friends and Transformers fans alike, particularly G1 Transformers fans. It's the time-travelling toy collector here, and I'm sharing with you a glimpse at G1 Grimlock, Heroic Autobot Dinobot Commander Grimlock, all the way from the 1980s. Now, some of you already know this. Grimlock was my first ever Transformers toy. Prior to getting Grimlock, I had no interest in collecting or playing with or looking at Transformers toys whatsoever. They just didn't grab me. It's sacrilege to say now, I get that, so please don't turn off the video. As you know, the story changes. But I think it's always important to remember where we came from, and where I came from in terms of collecting Transformers. It's this figure here, it's Grimlock, G1 Goodness Grimlock. Prior to getting Grimlock, I had collected a couple of the Robo machines from Bandai, which then were rebranded as GoBots. That's a whole other story which we won't engage with right now. I can already feel the comments heating up at the very mention of the dreaded GoBots. I actually have a soft spot for them, but I dare say we'll talk about that at another time. But yeah, Transformers really grabbed my attention with the introduction of the Dinobot line. Prior to that, it had been Heroic Autobots, their cars, and evil Decepticons, their planes, and they changed from robots to vehicles and back again. And yeah, the Robo machines just got to me first, and so I kind of suppose that they initially won my heart, and Transformers kind of felt like they were sort of trying to pull the rug from under my collection. How dare they? And with a very narrow narrative. But then I saw in the toy store the Dinobots, particularly Grimlock. And back in the 80s, the price point wasn't cheap. I won't do a comparison with now, but take my word for it, it wasn't cheap. And I've mentioned this in some of my Instagram posts. The box art for all of the Transformers, because this was the first time I really started looking at them, was really something special. It really was. And the Transformers were presented in their alternative mode, not the robot mode. And the artwork on the box, as many people will know, was quite simply something designed to fire up our imagination. Often the robot mode that went alongside these figures, well, it left a little bit to be desired in terms of playability, in terms of articulation, in terms of well, even accuracy. I mean, some of them didn't even have legs that could be moved. They didn't even have separate legs. Some of them had conjoined legs that was nothing like they were sold to us on that amazing packaging. But these figures really called out to me from off the shelf, as I'm sure they did with other people. And so yeah, Grimlock very quickly came into my grasp, and it wasn't long before other Dinobots followed. And I had the entire range except for, over here in the UK, Swoop. And I didn't actually manage to get Swoop until I had my interest refired, and I found him on eBay, an original Swoop on eBay, and was lucky enough to win that auction. Anyway, Swoop and other Dinobots is for another time. I wanted to talk a little bit about where my collection started and G1 Grimlock. Grimlock's playability is, I think, he's one of the G1 figures that really has playability in both modes. So yeah, we can see here quite straightforwardly that his dinosaur mode is very recognizable. I mean, he has sadly some of his limbs are going. I know how he feels, but he has articulation in his jaws, in his little dino arms, and in his legs. And it doesn't matter which way round you stick him, or which way round you look at him, or which way round you photograph him, You know what you're seeing, and you know it's a dinosaur. You know it's a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but you also get the sense that it's some sort of robotic vehicle mode. Now, the same, I would say, is also true of his robot mode. Now, I've said before, I'm not going to do transformation tutorials and transformation videos. I will drop it. I will probably break them. I will definitely swear, particularly with some of the newer figures. And I will again probably talk about that elsewhere. But yeah, I'm not going to ruin your day by making you watch me transform him. So with a little bit of digital magic, I'll see if I can make him into his robot mode without knowingly causing any disruptions. Let's see if that'll work. Wow, the power of modern technology. So here he is, Dinobot Commander Grimlock in his robot mode. And yes, he has fully articulated and posable arms and legs. It's an absolute delight. You can put him in all sorts of positions when you're playing with him. He's got the sort of leg playability and posability that I was really dependent on as a child to really maintain my suspension of disbelief when playing with the figure. He's a big old bulky guy, but you can see that he is, well, absolutely, ooh, I've probably been at the dino wine from what we can see there, but he is very clearly a Cybertronian hero of old. Now, for me, back in 1980s, toys were most definitely created for playability. One of my interests, I suppose, one of the reasons I started becoming a time-traveling toy collector, really was to hold up a lens at those toys we played with back in the late 70s and the 80s, possibly even the 90s, and look at how they've evolved. Now, we've seen over the last few years various iterations of Transformers toys, particularly various iterations of, well, not particularly necessarily, but certainly of Dinobots that can combine, Dinobots that have been reimagined and based on the Michael Bay films that came out. Again, a big splitter of opinion, and I get that. But for me, my love of the Transformers and of the range that I then discovered through my engagement was with this figure, was with Grimlock. So he has a very special place in my heart. That said, I then see that there's a range of Transformers toys, well, I say toys, masterpiece editions that, you know, they're not for kids. These are not for kids to play with at the price point, in my opinion. And I mean, you know, others may well have a different view, but I don't think I'd pay some of the price points for masterpiece editions of figures and then let kids play with them and turn my back on them for any length of time. I know what I was like when I was playing with toys. They needed to be robust because they really, you know, when they were fighting to save Cybertron, they really were fighting to save Cybertron. So I'm always impressed when a toy stands up to that kind of rigor. That said, I've obviously, so those of you that follow my posts on Instagram know that I've started dipping into the new Studio Series 86 range, as well as some of the War for Cybertron figures. And yeah, I'm happy to look at, and no doubt we'll be looking at some of those in the near future. But I was really impressed with Studio Series 68 Grimlock, 86 rather, Grimlock, and I'm really keen to put the two together at some point. Not for this. This is really just me saying, hey, this figure means a lot to me as a toy. This figure was a landmark toy for me, really. He represents the gateway for me into a new wave of imagination and adventure and playability. And again, I just want to come back to the point I made earlier on about the packaging. The packaging was exciting. the packaging really built up the idea that these guys were warriors. I mean, look at the detailing on this face. You know his attitude. If you've seen the G1 cartoon, you can hear the voice. This is a bulky guy. All the Dinobots are quite bulky, with some substance. Okay, he's not the heaviest, and as I say, some of his limbs, some of his posability isn't quite as strong as it once was, but he does what he needs to do, and when lined up with his other Dinobot colleagues, he's a particularly potent figure. Yep, he has a bit of a backpack. Show me a Dinobot that doesn't have a backpack, and I'll show you a third-party knockoff. But yeah, I'm absolutely enthused by this figure, and I can never not be. You know, every time I take him in hand, I am enthused by Grimlock. He just really stands apart for me from a lot of the other figures that came my way through birthdays and Christmases thereafter, because they were added to the set, they were added to the collection. Grimlock pioneered that collection for me, because he wasn't a robot that turned into a car and back again. He wasn't a robot that turned into a plane or back again. He was a dinosaur. This was a dinosaur robot. And, you know, in the 80s, I was really into dinosaurs. So, judge away. But I was. So this keyed into everything I loved. I was collecting Star Wars figures, so I loved robots and droids and space and sci-fi. This was the first real fusion of that kind of set of interests. And I think that's what made me reach up and pull this off the shelf to say, hey, this is really interesting. And again, as I said, the artwork on these boxes, really incredible. Sadly, I do not have any of my old G1 toy boxes from the first time around. They were torn open, I won't lie. They were torn open. The tech specs that we used to get on the back were cut out and kept and treasured. And I still have them, so maybe I'll show them either on my Instagram or here at some point. But you know, they really fired up and they really fed the imagination of the generation, and I think that is what has kept the mythos and the enthusiasm for Transformers, whether they're complex, whether they're a little overtly animated in their reproduction as a toy. I think we're at a real peak point now in collecting Transformers, in terms of what we see with the Studio Series ranges, with the War for Cybertron ranges. That's not a comment or a discussion or a critique of the War for Cybertron series. I know that various people have their own opinions on whether it's decent or it's not decent. I would suggest it's of its time, as all things always are. And nostalgia plays a huge part in what we treasure and how we value what we know to be our one true way. There isn't always one true way, and for a whole other generation of Transformers fans and Transformers collectors, perhaps War for Cybertron is the thing that will really engage them. So this was just a sort of a briefish video, just to say and share my enthusiasm for G1 Grimlock, and say this is where for me this started. Is it a toy review? Not so much, but if you were somebody who collected Transformers in the 80s and, like me, probably lost some of them to car boot sales or garage sales or whatever, when your parents were clearing out your room or clearing out boxes they had in storage, then you understand the connection that we have with the toys that helped form our creative minds and our imaginations. And that's why I like to think that, you know, a thing of beauty is a toy forever, because it will stay with us. It will always take us back to some special points, some difficult points, some romanticized points, and some exciting points in our own development, our own childhood. And I don't think we can ever underestimate the power of toys in that. And that's why I think some people find them very comforting, and I know I find revisiting some of these figures and other things that I'll be talking about in the future hugely comforting, and I'll say oddly therapeutic. I'm sure it's not odd really, but I would never have expected it to be quite as therapeutic as I find it. But anyway, yes, so Generation 1 Grimlock, excellent playability. For me, I also quite like his display ability, but I know it pales into insignificance sometimes next to things like the Studio Series 86 Grimlock, for example. And he definitely ain't no Robo machine, but we'll leave that there. Anyway, maybe you also started your collection with G1 Grimlock. Maybe you started it with Studio Series 86 Grimlock. Or maybe you have a Masterpiece Grimlock and think there's nothing that can best it. And maybe you're right. Everyone's entitled to their own views and opinions around their toys. This is just mine and my idle ramblings. If you found it useful or interesting, or you want to hear more, then please do subscribe and hit the notification button, and you'll hear from me in the near future when I start talking about another toy or another model or another piece of nostalgia from my childhood and possibly from yours. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Let me know if there's anything particular you want me to look at or talk about, or share some thoughts or insights. Not that I necessarily have any insights, but I can go away and get some. Anyway, take care, keep safe. Always, always remember that a thing of beauty is a toy forever. Till next time, this is the Time Travelling Toy Collector, signing out.